41 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. You've all received
Bienvenue à la 41e réunion du Comité sur le commerce international. Vous avez reçu une mise à jour concernant le voyage à Washington. Nous sommes maintenant à 94 000. Est-ce que le comité serait prêt à adopter ce budget de voyage et de le transmettre? Donc, je vais le signer dans un...
Motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February 12th, 2026. The committee is resuming its study of Canada's trade with Japan. Our Business Council of Canada, Mr. Kennedy, unfortunately did not have the right headset this morning and is unable to participate. Really? Yes.
He's based in Japan. He's not here to buy it.
He's in Japan. That's why he's such a great person to testify on Japan. But we do have Anton Morin, Senior Vice President, Sales, Commercial Strategy and Marketing by video conference for O'Meal SEC with us. So, Mr. Morin, thank you for joining us today. We almost would have had to cancel our meeting for this first hour. So we're so glad that you were able to connect with us. All right, so we'll now open the floor to Mr. Morin for up to 5 minutes, please, for opening statement.
Bonjour à tous. Je vous remercie de l'opportunité.
Good morning. I'm delighted to meet you and talk to you. My name is Antoine Morin. I'm head of marketing for Olymel. Olymel is a leading company in Canada in production, transformation and distribution of goods, of pork meat, and we have been operating since 1994. Today, exports towards Japan represent $1.5 billion per year, and Olymel accounts for 37% of these volumes. Japan is one of the most substantial markets and has the highest value, and they have a demanding consumers. They take care of health of animals, food safety, and the quality. And of course, Olymel is the exclusive supplier for 37 warehouses of Costco in Japan. We supply other producers and distributors and Japanese restaurants. This relationship is vulnerable because of the African pig disease. This African disease is highly contagious and affects pigs and wild boar. It is actually present in several regions in the world, in Europe and in Asia. It does not present a risk to human health, but it leads to high mortality for these animals that are infected. If one single case were detected in Canada, Japan would close its borders to Canadian pork. The economic impacts would be considerable for producers and workers in rural communities all over the world. As a consequence, this would have an effect on Japan. As an important importer of pork, Japan would lose its access to a substantial supply of refrigerated pork. An interruption in the supply would create important challenges for retailers and distributors and consumers. This is why it's essential that Canada concludes with Japan a zoning agreement based on this disease, and that this be based on be settled in affected regions before this crosses borders. Zoning is recognized internationally by the World Health Organization for Animal Health. It restricts commercial exchanges and to the areas only affected by this disease. In a country as big as Canada, an approach based on the provinces would lead to disproportionate commercial consequences. This type of outbreak would compromise exportations to regions in hundreds or thousands of kilometers of distance from where the disease is. Canada is applying with success a regional zoning approach in the poultry sector. And we think that this type of approach will encourage the health of the animals and further commercial trade. Canada has concluded agreements with various commercial partners, namely the United States and the Philippines. Discussions are progressing with Japan, and it's important to have a final agreement and be able to export to non-affected regions. On another note, beyond these health challenges, the logistical reliability of Canada is essential to maintain the trust in Asian partnerships. These exportations towards Japan depend on an efficient and predictable supply chain, transport by railway, and transport and infrastructures in the ports. The problems in the ports and the work conflicts have slowed down logistics and have had direct consequences on our capacity to produce in time and remain competitive. The market, such as Japan, is where reliability is important, is essential to continue to protect in order to encourage this corridor between Canada and Asia. In conclusion, I repeat that the two main challenges are the most important challenges are of strategic importance. First of all, the conclusion of a zoning agreement in the regions affected by this disease in order to protect the Japanese market. And secondly, the maintaining of a supply chain that is reliable and performant and ensures the fluidity of rail transport and port infrastructures that link Canada and the Asian markets. I would like to thank you for your attention. Mr. Morin.
Going to switch things around a little bit for our first round at the request of the Vice Chair, and start with Mr. Lavoie first.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci à notre témoin.
Chan, thank you very much to our witness to be here with us this morning. I'm delighted that you're here. This motion is very important. I presented it, and I was delighted that the committee decided to study it and that you're here with us this morning. Your experience, Olimal has been in Japan for a few years, and your experience, or many years, and your experience is very important, and that's what I would like to ask you to talk about this morning. My first question is actually very straightforward. We wish to increase by twofold exportations towards Europe over the next few years. What advice would you give us or give to a company from Quebec or Canada that wishes to develop in Japan and export? Where would they start? What would your first pieces of advice be? Well, thank you very much for your question, Mr. Lavoie. It's a very good question, and you need the trade capabilities and logistics to support such a demanding market such as the market in Japan. So I would start with this, having these capabilities, and then I would look at the what assets you have from an operational point of view, and look at what the requirements are on the market, and look to see if there's real demand in Japan with the capacity per capita. This is a market that is very very positive. It's the same and a very good market to be on, and it's the same for Korea. You need to look at the market and their ability to fulfill the needs of the population. You talked about logistics and operations. What do you mean by logistics? Are we talking about transport logistics? I know that we've already received or welcomed people from the Vancouver port. They want to widen or improve the port. What type of, in order to improve exportations, what type of logistics are you talking about? Well, we have 3 sites in Canada. So Vancouver is one of the ports. So you need ports, maritime ports, and you need to be able to manage all of these different logistics in order to meet the requirements of the expectations of the Asian customers who are very demanding. So you have to look at the capacity of the country and the operations or operational capacity for the group itself if they wish to export. What's your timeline? For example, if a company tomorrow were to say, well, I would like to go back onto the Japanese market or analyze the market and see what the capacity is, and I want to export and open up new markets, how long do you think that might take? How many years to say, well, we're going to start analyzing the market and then sending out our first order? What do you think the timeline would be? Well, I would say that if we start from scratch, we would be talking about 18 to 24 months. If we're talking about international synergies in the situations we've just mentioned, such as with Costco, it could be quicker insofar as we could use some accelerating elements that are part of the group. Thank you. Now, when we talk about a food exporter such as Olymel, are there any measures around and already in place set up by the government, or measures that the government might be able to set up in order to make your life easier and open up these markets to you and any other operator? What could the government actually put in place as a measure to help you? Well, I'll repeat my message that I already mentioned. The zoning agreements. The zoning agreements is something that is floating over our heads. For example, if there is trouble happening, there could be there could be problems for the supply chain, and then the list of access rights, the fluidity of regulations to access certain markets. You were talking about Europe just now. All of the barriers that are non-tariff related barriers. So, for example, the use of certain phytosanitary products on the site, and this is a block to selling on certain markets. So you need to provide as much access as possible to Canadian exporters. There are never too many options in this sort of list of trade deployment. Could you talk about the non-tariff related barriers? Do you have any at the moment with Japan? Well, within the context of the Trans-Pacific Agreement, the rates to access Japan and the tariffs, for certain categories are sort of go from the top downwards, and we should be able to have digressive rates with 0% access for Japan in certain categories. That's an agreement also that's already been agreed on. Non-tariff related agreements, if I look at the market, we have some for certain products that are used on health sector sites, and in Canada we work with certain chemicals in order to optimize the use of certain products. And Europe, they have set up a regulation that ensures that we cannot access European markets with certain of these chemical products. And so these are non-tariff related barriers. That means that we would have to go beyond existing models. They might be okay in Asia, but they would stop our access to other markets. Thank you very much.
Jared Lawton, welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's great to be on this committee for the first time, especially on a study on Canada's trade with Japan. This is incredibly relevant to my riding, which both in the agricultural sector as well as the manufacturing sector, both imports and exports with Japan. So very happy to be here. I was hoping to have Mr. Kennedy available, but I will ask you, Monsieur Morin, about pork, because you did bring it up, and this is obviously not a huge export for Elgin County in Ontario, but we do sell pork to Japan. And one of the challenges, well, no, I shouldn't say challenges, one of the opportunities, and I saw this when I was in Taiwan a couple of years ago, they were so proud to be serving Canadian pork. They were actually putting up these big signs at the hotel because of how good the product was. And is that your experience as well, that, you know, in Asia, Canadian pork is widely regarded as being not just an affordable product, but actually a superior product?
Merci.
Thank you for that question. Yes, absolutely. Canada is well known for being a strong player in terms of quality as opposed to international competition. And if trade partners promote Canadian pork, they promote it before their own brand. That's something we do. We promote Canadian expertise. And Canada represents 50% of the non-frozen meats sent to or exported to Japan. And there are 2.6 million pigs sent per week. So 50-50 in terms of shows how this Canada is put forward on this niche market.
Merci, je pense que c'est important.
And a system to support that, to get that incredible product to market, which is good for our farmers, it's good for our exporters. You mentioned ports in your opening remarks, and this is obviously not an area that we've seen run by this Liberal government as effectively as it needs to be. Just curiosity on my part, do you believe that privatizing the ports would actually lead to more efficient operations?
Je vais répondre transparemment.
I'm going to give you a straightforward answer. I don't think it's in my area of expertise to say whether it's private or public. What I can say is that service interruptions and the inconsistency in terms of the stability of some of our sort of trade or steps are detrimental to the exportations. We could have more fluidity in the system and more stability in our service providing pork.
The way the government is running these ports right now, what are the practical costs of that? I mean, if you have dollar figures, great, but if not, even just in an illustrative way, what does this mean for your operations and those of other organizations?
Si on l'illustre,
We're working with a product that arrives with a constant flow. For example, Vancouver is the exit point towards Asia. If the port is closed or there's a strike, we have to decide whether we're going to continue producing for clients who wish to have fresh produce, or do we send it into a freezing unit to send it to other markets other than Japan, which is a premium market. I don't have any figures to give you today, but this gives a great deal of pressure within the logistical system, and that's where the instabilities lie and potential losses, because they're linked to decisions that are unfortunate in this uncertain situation.
In my riding in St. Thomas and Elgin, and we've also seen media reporting from Japan about the forthcoming closure of Canada's consulate in Nagoya, Japan, which reportedly will be shutting its doors in August. Have you received any formal or informal notification of this?
aucune.
None.
Assuming this happens on the schedule that we understand now, I mean, what are you concerned about us losing out on if we lose this footprint in Japan that we would have to build relationships, nurture those relationships, and do all of these other things to iron out some of these issues you're referring to?
Les attentes d'une entreprise.
Well, the expectations of a company such as mine means that we need the levels of service that essential, and we need the support services essential, and this system, a system with the local governments. Now, the expectations are that the level of service remain the same, and regarding the changes, so governmental presence, I encourage you to think about why this is happening and ensure that it's properly interpreted by our counterparts in Japan.
Monsieur Morin, we're already trading with Japan. This is not new. That's not to say we couldn't do it better. But anyone who says we could replace what we have with the United States with Japan is ignoring this fundamental fact, right?
Ces deux marchés qui sont à valeur ajoutée.
These two markets have added value and are essential, and I think that making a choice between one or the other would be a mistake. I think it's essential to have access to both these countries and good trade agreements with them.
Madame la Présidente, bonjour à tous.
Chair, thank you. I'm delighted to be with you. Mr. Morin, thank you very much for being here with us. It's a great pleasure to have such an important company such as yours based in Saint-Hyacinthe and here with us today. Now, first question. In your export markets, could you give us an overview of the importance of Japan, the United States, and China? Yes, I can. Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Deschênes. Our headquarters is in Boucherville. So we have 5 markets, added value. Canada, we're very present with our brands. We have the United States with almost 17 to 18% of volumes for the American market. We have China, which, with a drop since the 2020-2021, it represented 24% of our sales at the time of port exports. We're now at 16%, and so our desire was to distance ourselves from certain few commodity markets such as China in in the context of uncertainty, this is something we've actually achieved, and we're more resilient now on this market. Japan, it's an essential market for Olymel, and that's why I'm here talking to you today. And South Korea is fully expanding for pork from Canada. And to answer your question about, we're present in over 50 countries, but the other ones are more to do with commodities. And so the market value dictates how we make our sales, and it's based on realities on the market and also on realities of availability on certain markets. For example, in Taiwan, things are a bit different there. Let's talk about the question of China. I understand that the importance of your exports towards China has dropped in the past few years. Is this linked to the trade tariffs from China? Well, there's a direct link with the trade tariffs in China. From China, we had a 12% up to 25%. Canadian pork at the moment is approximately at 35% for China. Certain cuts that we used to send to China are now redirected towards other countries in a situation in which, when we include the trade tariff, the return on investment is less than for others. So it has an effect on our volume of sales sent out to China. And in a situation of uncertainty, that's where we've tried to diversify. It's a market that is essential still, though. Okay, just to give me an idea of the state of things, I was reading that China had imposed in order to responding message for electric vehicles, they have imposed certain tariffs. On pork, I thought it was 25%, but you said it even goes up to 37%, did you say? Well, when China announced 25, it was from 25 to 37. The base of 12 had been around for several years. It was a zero base for the industry, but the all the way up to 25 is something that was really difficult. So this add-on of 25% trade tariffs, how does it affect Olymel? Once again, some of the volumes are now destined towards other countries where the Chinese market doesn't provide the same value. We have this 7th dock. We use all of the products of the pig, the trotters, the head, all of the sub-products, and this is sent to the Chinese markets. There aren't that many alternatives other than China for these type of products, which means that the value and the absolute value of return on investment is very much affected financially because of this. And in the end, it's something that we can feel in the prices, which for Chinese consumers. You were saying recently in an article that you were talking about approximately 30 million of losses for Olymel because of these trade tariffs. Yes, we're talking about those approximate figures. So if I understand correctly, maybe you were optimistic in January when Prime Minister Carney had announced that there would be an agreement with the Chinese government. The size of the amounts were lower, but pork was not pushed aside. But we thought there was an agreement, and I can understand that the reduction of the rates or the trade tariffs on pork are a priority. Well, on Canadian pork, it is a priority, yes, of course, and we were hopeful because of the announcement, but the negotiations are still ongoing. And we want to know, in the Canadian pig industry, we want to know when we can benefit from this negotiated trade tariff. And as you just said, negotiations are still ongoing, or discussions. Why do you think that there was going to be a reduction in trade tariffs, but it didn't actually happen? That's a good question, actually. Very good. We were hoping for an end result, and we're hoping it'd be positive, but we're still waiting for these reductions to happen. And now, so we have an office in China, Canadian Meat Advocacy Office, managed by Mr. White. It's present in China, and it's an office in which industry is investing to be able to have a certain amount of feedback from China and ensure that we remain in the game in terms of what's going on.
5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witness for appearing and providing their valuable testimony this morning. I wanted to ask about Olymel's operations in Canada, and if they had any views on what the business conditions are like for them operating in Canada. How do they find regulatory burden, labor costs, input costs, logistics costs? Could you tell us a little bit about your experience operating here in Canada?
Oui, merci, merci pour votre question.
Thank you for your question. There are two sides to the coin. Now, one of the good sides about being in Canada are all the standards, health standards, animal welfare, employee standards, logistics. These make us very strong on the international market. And if we look at an example in the news at the moment, operating in Canada in a context of international exports, just looking at the price of petrol, which is different from other countries at the moment, means that we have an angle of competitiveness. At the moment, the price of petrol is lower in the south or in some provinces. This can lead to more competitiveness, or it could mean that they are less competitive. But at the moment, as far as filling up your tank and competitiveness and labour, well, we are trying to be as efficient as possible, and we're doing our job as well as we can. That's all I can say to you.
Did some of the high labor costs and regulatory burden in Canada have an impact on Olymel's decision to close and consolidate several plants? I think about 8 plants in the last 5 years in Canada, and the associated loss of jobs. Was that related to some of those high costs and high regulatory burden that you were just describing?
Les décisions, je dirais,
Well, decisions to consolidate were made in a situation in which we were trying to minimize our exposure to the market because it was inconsistent or uneven. The comment of your colleague on China just echoes this. We lowered the felling of animals on the market. The decision that was made was a mixture of different reasons, for a mixture of different reasons, and it was because of exposure to markets where the situation was more risky and more unstable.
Merci, Monsieur.
Labor disruptions at the Port of Vancouver in the last several years?
Oui, on a été affectés.
Yes, we were. The company was. The strikes meant that we had to make unfortunate decisions on production operations that were aimed for the international market, and it led to more lead times, to delays in some departments. For example, fresh pork accumulating in the port of Vancouver just goes onto the ship, onto the carriers, and arrives at the same time, and that's what leads to inconsistency in terms of service, and it leads to more pressure, and it has an impact overall.
For us, I know there was some reporting about this, but I wonder if I could ask you directly, could you quantify for us in dollar cost the impact on Olymel as a result of the inability of the government to get labor peace at the Port of Montreal?
Sur le plan monétaire, j'ai pas l'exemple concret à vous partager. Par contre,
well, figures, I can't give you the figures, but I can talk about the number of containers per week that are sent out from the Port of Vancouver. Almost 250 containers per week that are sent from the Port of Vancouver. And when there was an interruption of service, it's quite easy. It's 50 containers per day that are delayed. And so we're talking about holding these containers in a secure area and putting the food products in a distribution center, which is something that we wouldn't need to hold normally. And this can make for additional costs, which add up very quickly.
Very short.
Yeah, just a last question on quantifying that loss as a result of the inability to secure labor peace. One of your VPs at the time, Paul Beauchamp, quantified that as in the range of millions of dollars to Olymel. Does that sound about right to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anglais, désolé. Donc, oui, absolument.
Yes, it does. If there are breaks in the flow of produce leaving, you're talking about millions of dollars, yes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. Bienvenue, Monsieur Morin.
Welcome, Monsieur Morin.
You get the full hour of all of us asking you a lot of questions. So really appreciate your patience and your expertise in your business area, and of course, as we're dealing in the study with Japan. I know a lot of my colleagues' questions have focused on Japan and your business there and the business environment for meat products in Japan. But I wanted to a bit zoom out and ask you, from your analysis and your company's perspective, the opportunities for Canadian meat products in other parts of Asia, in particularly Southeast Asia, when we're looking at obviously markets like China, which is quite big, but also Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, those places. Is your company involved in those business? Maybe start with that, and what other opportunities you see in those particular markets.
Merci pour votre question. Puis, ça me fait plaisir.
Thank you for that question. I'm delighted to be here for the full hour. As far as our presence in China, we're present. You talked about Indonesia, Malaysia, everything, all of the countries in Southeast Asia. We're already present in these countries and in this area. These are not markets that we serve directly. We have third parties, so trade companies that have interests that represent our interests in these countries, and we're present already in these countries and areas.
Markets for you? Are you looking into selling more products in those particular markets?
La réponse c'est oui.
Yes, markets such as Taiwan, they can pay for the added value, and that's where we can make a difference. Markets that buy low commodity price, well, the prices are going to determine the decisions in our company. A commodity being what it is, we will do international trade or trade it internationally. But our purpose is to stick to reliable business partnerships, and they're going to encourage quality as opposed to critical mass, and that's what we've decided to do within Olymel. We've decided to create more value in each of our stages of our business to encourage the overall picture.
Compare the volume of business that you do in Japan to some of these other places like China, you mentioned, Indonesia, Malaysia. What's the magnitude are we looking at? Is it a big difference? Is Japan your primary market, or you are seeing significant growth in these other Asian countries as well?
Philippines est en croissance.
The Philippines are a growing country. Japan is also a growing market. So we had chilled products, non-frozen. That's a growing market, and we're making the most of it and doing well. The chilled market, the frozen market, is also a good market. I was talking about swine fever. Spain is having to deal with the swine fever at the moment. They didn't have any regionalization agreement, and they were the number one exporter towards Japan, but they're not allowed to anymore. Spain is trying to find different outlets, and Japan is trying to find a business partner with whom they can do business, and we're going to be able to grow with Japan and in Japan. The Philippines also are growing. Malaysia is as well. It's a growing market too.
Canada recently concluded a free trade agreement with Indonesia, which we're in the process of finalizing the ratification both on the Canadian side and the Indonesian side. In addition, Canada is engaged in free trade negotiations with Philippines, Thailand, as well, and with ASEAN, the organization that represents all of the Southeast Asian countries. Would that be of benefit to your company in terms of expanding your share in the market and would allow for better market access for Canadian meat products in those countries?
À votre question, dès lors qu'on a
Now,
davantage
to your question, if we have more access, it's beneficial. Of course, we want the maximum access to be able to have an open map and not be vulnerable in certain markets. But if we have access to new countries, it's always a good thing. And I would say it's a bit too early for us to say to what extent opportunities are with this situation are big, but we, of course, want to export as much as we can.
Mr. Deschênes for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Donc,
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. Let's continue our discussion. Mr. Morin. On the Japanese market, the arrival of the United Kingdom in the Trans-Pacific Agreement, do you perceive this as concerning? In Great Britain, with the way they are disposed geographically, there are two types of business at the moment in Japan: chilled, fresh, and frozen. Frozen, there's more competitiveness with the arrival of the UK. On fresh chilled, because of their geographic situation, they're not. The transport time is very high, so we don't perceive this as an emerging competition from the United Kingdom. Earlier on, I was asking you about the importance of different markets. You gave us some figures, but no figures for Japan. Maybe you could tell me how important the Japanese market is for us. 18% of our exports, pork exports, is more important than China then at the moment. Yes. And do you see a possibility of improving this even further or increasing? That's what we want to do, yes. And what do you need in order to be able to achieve this? Well, we are deploying action plans to be able to do this. We're not lacking anything to do this. It's really something that's being put in place, and our cruising speed is increasing. Now, what's lacking and what might be reassuring in a situation of international trade? Well, in my role, it would be to have stability and a zoning agreement in order to have to have a long-lasting trade situation. Well, another question, and I'll finish on this. You talked about your office in China that you've just opened. Maybe you could give us information about are you open this to have an information on the state of things in China? What have you learned, and what could you share with us about what's happening there? What I could say is that there's great will to have agreements on pork prices, but the interpreter apologizes, didn't hear that because there was a lot of noise. What I was saying was that what we hear from the market at the moment is that there's this real willpower to have an agreement to reduce the Chinese trade tariff on Canadian pork. But they're also we're trying to find a solution. But it's quite difficult at the moment still to find the solution.
For 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Morin, I certainly appreciate the opportunity that you have had to give us a lot of advice. I guess I have, like Mr. Naqvi, I just have a couple questions about kind of a macro picture for you. How do you rank, or how do you think about which markets are more lucrative than others? Like, for example, like the Japanese market versus Indonesia versus China. Like, how do you think about ranking those, and where do you think the bigger opportunities are for your firm?
Donc, dans un premier temps, quand on fait l'étude d'un marché, on regarde
Now, first of all, when we look at the market research, we look at the capacity to fill the consumption per capita and the number of animals that can be killed. So we're looking at the type of meat cut or the type of product, but depending on the country, this is what runs or manages the choices we make.
Est-ce que je peux vous poser la question? Parce que
The other studies we're doing, do you believe, or how do you think about China versus Japan in that sense? Like, are they complementary to your business? Does doing more in one prevent you from doing more in the other, as an example?
Donc, à votre question, le marché de la
Now, to your question, China market in China and the question about China and Japan, these are complementary and markets that are essential. Japan values cuts that are others than China, and China is essential in terms of valuing sub-products that are not consumed in other countries. China is an essential player, and for the sale of Canadian pork, Japan is a market that wants premium cuts with added value, with specific requirements associated, and it's also an essential market. So to your question, they're very complementary.
Merci beaucoup. Si je peux retourner aux efficacités opérationnelles pour ce qui est du port, je sais que vous n'avez pas de position à savoir si le port doit être privatisé, mais bon, j'entends votre témoignage et votre préoccupation.
That's fair.
Absolument. Donc,
Absolutely. So what I'm saying is that we need stability, consistency on international trade, whether we're talking about railway transport. We've had forest fires, we've had sludge seeping down on the railway lines. There have been interruptions over the past year. We need these contingency plans. We need this trans-Canadian system, railway system, and pork supply needs to be fluid. It needs to be a way of generating value and not creating uncertainty in a situation of international trade.
And so, if I could ask, because it may become relevant to your business plus some of your peer companies and others who ship out of the port. If there are plans for privatization, would you measure whether it's a good idea based on the impacts to efficiency, but also the costs to the users of the port? Are those two factors that you would consider in judging whether this would be a good thing for your business?
absolument. Donc,
I would, absolutely. You've talked about the key variables, but also you can add fluidity and associated costs in terms of service. If the costs are reduced or increased, in both cases, it requires an analysis. And this will lead to different strategic decisions for the next to come.
Point for 5 minutes, please.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. Welcome, Monsieur Morin. Very interesting to hear you talking about a very strong industry for Canada. You said that it was in Boucherville? That's where your headquarters are? Yes. I wish to just ask you to clear up something. You talked about African swine flu in Spain and also the swine flu in Spain, and you talked about the African swine flu. Is it the same thing? Same disease? Yes, I ought to use the same terminology. It's the same terminology. It's African swine flu. Fever, sorry. And okay, let's clear that up now. Zoning. Who's going to decide on the zoning? Who decides on the zoning for African swine fever? Well, it's during the talks between the different countries in the light of the agreement that could happen with Japan. At the moment, discussions are about zoning each province. In Quebec, we have 3 sites. But in a case where the peripheral areas are affected, so what we would do is banish one of the sites from Japan, which would have a massive effect on our company and on our trade with Japan. Now, with the zoning system and the protocol adopted and agreed upon by the Japanese authorities, we could have a type of zoning that would be similar to what they do in the poultry sector with avian flu, which determines a peripheral area around a targeted site in order to eradicate the disease. But everything that's linked to the targeted site is accessible is available for international trade. Well, we know that avian flu, well, they fly, don't they, the animals? But pork, swine fever, how do they transmit it? Is it in the slaughterhouse or elsewhere? African swine fever comes from outside the country, so all of the measures that are health measures that are implemented means that we ask people if they have meat on them. We ask all of these questions at the borders, and they're essential to be able to contain and avoid this fever. So it comes from the outside. We don't have any in Canada at the moment. Thank you. I would have thought it would be the World Health Organization that would decide where this disease was coming from, but it's not them. It's all of the countries together deciding this, is it? Not really certain I understood your question. Well, I would have thought that those who decide that, for example, our herds unfortunately have swine fever, that wouldn't be the country, but would be an international organization such as the WHO. Well, African swine fever is declining. So in Canada, it's the agency for food agency, inspection agency, and so we have a North American protocol in place, and that's what they set off. If there were a case, that would be a major announcement if it were on the North American continent. Now, we talked about the efficiency of port areas in Canada. When you send your products out by container and go to Japan and send them to Japan, do you follow the traceability of your products all the way to their destination and when they arrive in the warehouses in Japan? Yes, we do. We have tracking systems that mean that we can see the temperatures in real time when they're in the containers, and we have sat-nav GPS systems. With your trackers, are you able to assess whether or not the efficiency of Canadian pork is better than, for example, Japanese pork? Is there a difference? Yes, we are able to do this. We have all of the data, the travel time, the unloading time, offloading time. We can estimate this based on the seasons or the holidays. There are bank holidays, for example, Golden Week. In certain countries, we can assess how much time it's going to take to unload or offload the goods, and depending on the seasons. Are you able also to assess the efficiency of a given cut of meat as opposed to another one, of one pork as opposed to another one? We can measure the efficiency of certain sorts of pork meat when we offload. Now, in terms of the Canadian offer, we do this in we were talking about Montreal and Halifax. So if you were to give the go-ahead to Japan, an A, how would you, on a level of A, B, C, D, what would you give in terms of efficiency to the Port of Vancouver? Well, I would say A, with no interruption, but with interruptions. I think I would give them a note, a mark. Thank you.
And thank you for your patience and for answering all of the questions today. We usually have a couple of people on a panel, and you handle it all on your own. So thank you very much for that. We will suspend. I believe our other witnesses for our next panel are almost ready. We could start our next, instead of waiting till 12 o'clock, we could start as soon as they're ready, if that's okay with the committee. So, all right. So we will suspend for a few minutes.
Pardon me. And there's a vote. Yes.
Yeah. pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18, 2025, the committee is resuming its study and the forthcoming CUSMA study. We have with us today from the Canadian Cattle Association, somebody we see all the time, Mr. Fulton, President by video conference. And from the Coffee Association of Canada, Robert Carter, President also by video conference. And from Vidcrucher Incorporated, Sean Fahey, didn't pronounce that properly, President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome. Glad to see you in person. We will start with our opening remarks. And Mr. Fulton, up to 5 minutes, please.
Well, thanks, and it's great seeing you virtually again, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, and thanks for the opportunity to appear before you again to discuss the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement, or CUSMA. For those that I haven't met, my name is Tyler Fulton. I'm the president of the Canadian Cattle Association, or CCA, and farm with my family near Birtle, Manitoba. Through our provincial members, CCA represents approximately 60,000 beef producers across the country, supporting jobs, the economy, rural communities, and food security. Through Canada's beef industry, over 350,000 jobs are created, and trade is a critical part of our sector. I'm pleased to be here today and discuss Canada's most important trading relationship, the U.S., in the context of CUSMA. The beef sector in Canada and the U.S. operates within a single market. We are fully integrated. Our industries built our infrastructure within the context of free trade. Live cattle historically have moved across the border relatively unimpeded and tariff-free, sometimes multiple times, before it becomes beef and then can sometimes trade one more time. Feed and inputs are also a critical part of the integrated market with the U.S. Integration lowers the costs for consumers on both sides of the border. It provides beef producers with more options and increases food security in Canada and the U.S. The Canada-U.S. trading relationship and the upcoming review of CUSMA is the #1 priority of Canada's beef sector. Each year, Canada exports account for about half of the value of beef and live cattle that we produce. The U.S. accounts for 75% of those exports, and Mexico about 5%. As we get closer to the CUSMA review, we are seeing more stakeholders on all sides of the border stand up and speak in favor of the important agreement. Just earlier this year, CCA was proud to join a trilateral agricultural industry letter to Minister LeBlanc and his counterparts in the U.S. and Mexico. The North American agricultural sector is aligned in supporting the renewal and strengthening of CUSMA. The beef cattle sector has built our business environment around CUSMA and its predecessors, NAFTA and CUSTA. Our beef counterparts in the U.S. and Mexico also signed the letter. We are united in our asks of government to renew CUSMA. CCA has been active since before the last U.S. election, working with stakeholders in the U.S. to promote our integration. We continue to engage with our U.S. counterparts, other stakeholders, Congress, and of course, our embassy on the ground. As we move forwards towards the review, which will almost certainly be a renegotiation, CCA is committed to working with government and stakeholders across North America to see through an agreement that keeps tariff-free trade flowing. As you probably recall, I've recently spoken about our sector's concerns with the ongoing Mercosur negotiations in your committee. While I won't go into details again, I do flag that the relationship of Mercosur to CUSMA. Our sector is worried that Canada is rushing to get a deal with Mercosur done on the eve of the CUSMA review without considering how this will impact our trading relationship with the U.S., Canada's largest trading partner. We encourage Canada to keep CUSMA at the top of our trade agenda. While we support strategic trade diversification, when it comes to beef, Canada and the U.S. must work together to create the best product in the world. We cannot and should not jeopardize one of the largest, the best and largest beef supply chains in the world. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Carter, please, for up to 5 minutes. Carter, can you please unmute yourself? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice Chairs, honorable members, thank you for the opportunity to appear today. My name is Robert Carter. I am the president of the Coffee Association of Canada. The Coffee Association of Canada is the national voice for Canada's coffee industry, representing our roasters, processors, distributors, and importers who form the backbone of our industry. I don't have to tell any of you today that Canadians love coffee. You probably know that from your personal experiences just today, but coffee is more than just a very popular drink. It's part of Canada's economy in very real ways. Coffee has an economic impact of approximately $30 billion in the Canadian market, employing hundreds of thousands of people. We also export over $1 billion in roasted and decaf coffee to the United States on an annual basis, including virtually all the decaf coffee Americans consume. So this has been a deeply integrated, century-old supply chain that has benefited both countries. Because Canada coffee is processed from beans grown abroad, it currently falls outside of CUSMA's rules of origin. For decades, that didn't matter, as both countries maintained zero tariffs regardless, but that predictability has gone. So the problem we have today is that just in the last 14 months, as an example, we've gone from zero tariffs to 25 to 35 to 10, and thanks to the agriculture exemption order, back to zero. Each move was made unilaterally without negotiation and can be reversed in the same way. So that instability has had a direct impact on what consumers pay in Canada as well as in the US. The tariffs are disrupting supply chains, and those costs are being passed directly not only to American shoppers, food service, and restaurants, but also on the Canadian side as well. The current zero tariff status is welcome, but it's not a solution as we see it. We know another U.S. consultation on tariff lists is imminent, and there's no guarantee coffee remains excluded. Meanwhile, the damage to Canadian industry from the past year is real. We've lost U.S. contracts to American competitors, deferred capital investment, plant underutilization here in Canada, production shifts towards U.S. facilities, and up to and over 20,000 Canadian jobs are being lost in that risk. So our ask is in the CUSMA review, the opportunity to make permanent what an executive order cannot. Currently, coffee falls outside of the CUSMA agreement. That current exemption provided through the treaty, not an executive order. We'd like to see fix the rule of origin to recognize the value Canadian businesses add to roasting and decaf coffee. So the current CUSMA rule, Annex 4B, heading 0901, requires a change from another chapter entirely. So we're looking to have that subheading level change, meaning that roasted green beans into roasted coffee or decaffeinating them would constitute sufficient transformation for CUSMA originating status. We're now looking for complex value add calculation. The process is transformational, which takes place in Canada, and this matters to our entire industry, not only from large processors that supply major U.S. retailers to local roasters found in communities across the country. All of them add value in the transformation, but none of them can currently access CUSMA protection for that work. Our U.S. counterparts negotiators support this change in principle. We're also addressing Mexico, which has historically blocked this to protect domestic growers. We're working with our counterparts in the U.S., National Coffee Association, and exploring conversations with Mexican stakeholders engagement. So this is just not a Canadian issue. Every time tariffs disrupt the supply chain, American consumers and businesses feel it too. The 2026 CUSMA review is the opportunity to fix that permanently for both countries. Thank you very much, and I welcome questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carter. On to Mr. Fahey, please, for up to 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, membres du comité, Thank you, and merci for the opportunity to appear here before the Standing Committee on International Trade regarding the 2026 review of CUSMA. My name is Sean Fay, and I'm the founder and CEO of VidCruiter. We are a Canadian technology company headquartered in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada, and we provide AI-powered hiring technology used by more than 125,000 people around the world. Nous sommes fiers d'être une compagnie canadienne, bilingue et acadienne.
We are proud to be a Canadian Acadian company.
50% of our revenue from day one of founding has come from the United States. As a Canadian technology exporter, I see firsthand the importance of stable access to North American markets. I've also seen the value of government support for Canadian businesses. Earlier this year, I participated in the Canadian Trade Mission to Mexico, led by Honorable Mr. Dominic LeBlanc, where we developed relationships that have already created new opportunities for our business. For companies like VidCruiter, CUSMA provides the certainty needed to invest, hire, and grow in Canada. That is why Chapter 19, the digital trade chapter of CUSMA, is so important for technology companies like mine all across the country. As AI becomes a larger part of our economy, maintaining a stable, predictable framework for digital trade will become increasingly important. As the committee considers Canada's priorities for the 2026 review, I would like to offer 3 observations. First, the digital trade provisions of CUSMA have provided significant value to Canadian businesses across North America. Preserving the certainty that these provisions will support continued innovation, investment, and job creation in Canada. If we didn't have CUSMA or its previous equivalents, VidCruiter may not be in business today, and definitely would not be the success story of Atlantic Canada that we have become. This agreement enables Canadian tech companies to easily access the U.S. market, which tends to be an early adopter of new technology. Second, there are opportunities to strengthen regulatory cooperation between the 2 parties or the 3 parties, particularly in terms of privacy, cybersecurity, and AI policy. Greater alignment can help Canadian companies scale more efficiently while maintaining strong protections and public trust. Specifically around AI policies, Canada can help shape these new standards as they're still being developed today. And where Canadian firms build to that standard, government procurement is a natural place to reward it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fay, there's been a vote called.
Oh.
Is the committee in agreement to continue the committee until the completion of the bells, or enough time for us to decide if we're here or if we're upstairs? If we continue with our time, we could actually get through round 1 by the time we would have to vote. So maybe we'll just do 5-minute rounds, and that way we can then either complete the session for today. Okay, please continue, Mr. Fay.
How much time do I have left?
You have 2 minutes and 10 seconds.
So my second point was about aligning AI policies between the countries. And if we can align our AI standards that are still being debated today, Canadian firms that will build to that standard, and government procurement is a natural place to reward companies that do that. Not preference for its own sake, but ensuring public systems run on AI that we can hold and be held accountable to that standard. Third, continued support from Canadian businesses seek to grow internationally can help strengthen Canada's economic reliance. Trade missions, export programs, initiatives that help Canadian companies access new markets contribute directly to growth and employment here in Canada. Government procurement could play and must play an important role in building Canadian economic resilience. Public sector organizations should strive to be among the earliest adopters of innovative technologies built in Canada and make the procurement process easier to help foster Canadian companies, while ensuring the government receives the best value for taxpayers. For many Canadian technology companies, the biggest challenge is not developing technology. It's navigating complex procurement processes and scaling successful solutions across the government. Where a technology has demonstrated value within one department, there may be opportunities to explore more efficient pathways to broaden that across the entire government. Streamlining access to enterprise-wide licensing of software within the Canadian government could help proven technologies get department access across multiple departments, enabling the government to scale. And streamlining these software contracts internationally could help even more. For example, currently the United States has something called FedRAMP, which is a U.S. procurement body to govern how software companies can sell to the U.S. government. Canada has an equivalent called RFSA. They do not see eye to eye. So I have to register in both countries to sell to equal governments. It takes 2 years to register with the U.S. and costs millions of dollars. However, I'm already registered to sell to the Canadian government. If those were seen as equals, we could directly sell to the U.S. government tomorrow morning, which would be a huge opportunity for all Canadian tech companies. The U.S. companies do not have such a barrier to enter into Canada.
Thank you very much. Very interesting comments. Mr. Mantle for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing and providing their testimony. Mr. Carter, a few questions to you first. I understand that roasted coffee, was subject to retaliatory surtaxes until September of last year. So roasted coffee in the United States imported into Canada, Canadian importers and consumers paid retaliatory surtaxes on that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And I understand that that is largely because of an issue between origin under the free trade agreement and marking under the retaliatory surtaxes. So although roasting coffee in the United States would not change its origin, for the purposes of Canada's retaliatory surtaxes, we considered it to be marked as a good of the United States and therefore applied those retaliatory surtaxes. Is that correct?
That's right.
And forgive me if I'm misunderstanding here, but as far as I know, Canada does not grow coffee beans. And correct. Other than a few places in the United States really doesn't commercially grow coffee beans either.
Yes.
So why did the government of Canada put surtaxes on roasted coffee?
Yeah, great question. And retaliatory tariffs, I think, are just a standard and legitimate trade policy response, but it signals that Canada will not accept unilateral measures without cost to the other side. So I think from our standpoint, it had an impact overall, but can't really speak to the policy behind it other than we see it as a standard and legitimate trade policy response.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, the government said that they would try to target products that Canada made itself or that it could get other places. Do you know what happened to the money that was collected from your members who paid those surtaxes? Did the government keep that money, or have they given it back to you?
Great question, and I'll have to follow up on that answer with you. I'll provide a written response after this.
To the extent that the government has kept that money from your importers for products that we don't make in Canada, do you think that the government should return that money now that they've canceled those surtaxes?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's one that we've had different dialogue with some folks in terms of what the process would look like. So it's hard for me to say at this point. We've had different conversations with our members, but I think that's something I might be able to follow up with you on as well.
But as a general proposition, you do or don't want that money back?
I would suggest that our members would be interested in that conversation for sure.
Okay, I think we understood your answer. Another question on the U.S. Dispute. One of the things that I've discovered about coffee is that it falls outside the CUSMA or USMCA in the sense that roasted coffee does not result in originating status for that good. So when Canada has exemptions for U.S. actions for CUSMA-compliant goods, which it has received over the last several tariff actions by the U.S. administration, coffee has not been included in those because it can't originate under the agreement. Is that right?
Correct. So
although we may have some relief, there's no relief for your industry. You're paying that full freight when it was most recently 10%, although that's been struck down as well, but under appeal. But you were paying full freight for that, despite the idea that CUSMA goods are exempt.
Correct.
Okay. Because we've often heard that Canada has, the best deal in the world with the United States, but I think, as your industry points out to the committee, there are some industries where that's not the case because they cannot benefit from the agreement.
Correct. Yeah. Right now, the agreement's not recognizing the substantial transformation, which is the true value add that takes place here in Canada. So it's really a simple heading change that we're looking to implement in the CUSMA negotiations, just having that substantial transformation recognized, because right now it's invisible.
Thanks. And okay, I've got 9 seconds. Mr. Fahey, data localization in Chapter 19, what's your view on that?
Outside of the privy of what we do, that would be a bigger tech company sort of issue.
Mr. Fonseca, please, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for your testimony. I'd like to start with Mr. Fulton, and welcome back to our committee. You're a regular here, and we thank you for that, and we thank you for the 350,000 jobs that your sector employs. I also want to thank you for the letter that your industry, your association, put together with your counterparts and sent to negotiators and sent to Washington in terms of working together and understanding how important CUSMA is for all three countries and how it works well, how it should be renewed, how it should be improved, and how we should get this agreement over the next 16 years, which is also what Minister LeBlanc has written to his counterparts that he's negotiating with. So I want to ask you about, so Prime Minister Carney's emphasized a Team Canada approach. I could tell you it worked very well as we negotiated NAFTA. And in your opinion, so how important is it that governments and industry, Parliament speak with one voice defending Canada's interests during these trade negotiations? How important is that?
I think we've got a long history of working with the government in negotiating the agreements. I think our experience has been that we get a far higher quality agreement when there's collaboration and work done together. And so I think if I can infer some take-home messages from what you're saying, I think what you're saying is it needs to be a strategic approach to trade, to the, even in this current environment, the trade diversification agenda. And that's 100% what we advocate in the beef sector. But I would say on behalf of the ag sector, that's exactly what I think there's unanimity on.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. So when you hear parliamentarians or party leaders criticize Canada's position or undermine Canada in some way, would that strengthen Canada's hand with our trading partners or risk undermining those negotiations that are so important to your sector, to all workers, to Canada?
I think broadly in this environment, there's there is a desire to come together, and get the best deal for Canada. That's not to say that there's not criticisms and valid I think points that that question the strategy that's being employed. My perspective from a beef producer standpoint is really about creating the conditions for to eliminate uncertainty and because that jives very well with an investment approach and one that honestly the beef sector is really hammering down on over the over the course of the last 2 years because of because of the demand for our product.
Speaks to our negotiating leverage and to eliminating or trying to address any kind of uncertainty. So taking that Team Canada approach. I want to speak to Mr. Carter. I do have Mother Parkers is in my riding of Mississauga East Cooksville. And I wanted to ask you just how integrated our Canadian American coffee supply chains and why preserving that integration is so important for us.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The short answer is very integrated. We have coffee companies that are over 100 years old that have had nice established supply chain with the U.S. So the U.S. is an important trading partner from a Canadian standpoint. So very well integrated, good long-term relationships.
And Mr. Pahie. Yeah, very short. Just Prime Minister Carney and Minister LeBlanc emphasized innovation as a key pillar of our strong Canadian economy. So how can trade agreements help Canadian technology firms scale internationally?
I think the key one that I mentioned was if we would recognize each other's government procurement vehicles as equal, that would open up an entire sector that it takes years to sell into right now, and a lot of red paperwork. We're currently in the process of accepting theirs, so it would be nice if that would be both ways.
Thank you very much. Mr. Deschênes for 5 minutes, please.
I have questions to you from the Association of Canadian Cattle. I'm delighted to hear that we can submit criticisms, but that we can work together. Now, I would like to ask you a question. How do you define the situation at the moment during the negotiations and the conduct of the government in terms of the renewal of the agreement?
In terms of our understanding our perspective and our desire to really eliminate the uncertainty and maintain CUSMA as we've benefited from the agreement in the last 5 years. I think that I have confidence that the government understands how much we rely on that two-way trade in the beef market, and how that actually builds resilience within the sector, but also for all of food security in our two countries.
Et qu'est-ce que vous entendez de la part des gens?
What do you hear from people you talk with and your counterparts in the United States?
They have exactly the same position. I'm very confident. We meet with my counterparts are the National Cattlemen's Beef Association in the U.S. We meet with them 3 to 5 times per year. And quite simply, there's a lot of similarities in terms of the culture around the industry, but also the reliance on free trade principles that benefits the sector.
Et avez-vous l'impression que vos homologues aux États-Unis?
Do you have the impression that your counterparts in the United States are increasing their pressure on President Trump?
They've been a vocal advocate for beef farmers and ranchers in the United States, and have a really effective staff team that really convey the same messages as we are conveying to our government. And so there's a ton of alignment, and we actually work fairly closely with them.
Est-ce que vous sentez que leur patience a atteint des limites ou que...
Do you think that they're reaching the limit of their patience, or are there people in the United States who are more and more motivated to put more pressure on the president?
That's probably not for me to comment on in terms of their relative patience, but I would say that there's a lot of uncertainty, whether it be within agriculture and our sector, whether it be a New World screwworm, a new pest that's just been found in the United States, or any of the trade, the chaos on the trade front. And so I can speak confidently that, that they are experiencing, something similar as what we are here in Canada, and that we're feel like we're just kind of trying to weather the storm.
Merci. Une question pour vous, Monsieur Chanfay.
Thank you. A question for you, Mr. Chanfay. Minister Solomon ought to announce this afternoon a policy on artificial intelligence. What are your expectations as regards this? We wish the government to put standards in place that are not necessarily as strict as the ones in Europe, but more strict than the ones in the United States. The Canada, for the moment, has not yet defined how the artificial intelligence is going to be policed. But if we have something in between, it would be good, and it will help companies in Canada that go to sell in the United States, because we'll be at a higher level, and maybe in Europe we might be there, and it will be easier to make the leap and reach their markets as well. It gives us a little advantage. People who come to Canada have to maintain our standard. It's important to have standards, actually, that are well-structured, well-defined. In the United States, they're not well-structured and defined at the moment.
A little bit more testimony in here. Mr. McKenzie for 4 minutes, and Mr. Hinton for 4 minutes, and if we can, we'll get to Mr. Deschênes for 1 minute. And then we can end the meeting and go and vote, all right? Mr. McKenzie, 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. Pardon me, Madam Chair. Mr. Fahey, if I could, you mentioned participating in the Canada Trade Mission to Mexico in, I've just forgotten if it was late February, early March.
Correct.
Can you inform us a little bit about your engagement with I presume, the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service for purposes of participating, how that went? Did you feel it was well organized? Was your company well supported by our Trade Commissioner Service?
I hadn't done a mission like that in 10 years, and none of that size. And I thought it was extremely well run, very impressive from start to finish. They had preset meetings for us with some of the biggest companies in Mexico, and high level. In one case, I met with the chief operating officer of an airline. So that's a pretty big company that could buy our services across their entire organization. We also met with matchmaker type organizations who we've now engaged with contractually to have as partners to help distribute our products within different regions of Mexico. So I thought it was, to all the points that you mentioned, it was a great mission. We had great outcomes. We had great meetings. I would definitely do that again. When it's at that level, it was phenomenal.
Did you spend your time just in Mexico City? If I recall correctly, there were side cities involved in that trade mission.
Yeah, we went to Monterrey as well, where we met with the AI lab that they have there. Top-notch work that's being done over there, and we actually partnered with a group from Monterrey running the AI lab to help with our product expansion in that area. So both regions were great, and overall it was a great experience.
So do I understand you may purchase some services from a Mexican firm as well as have marketing opportunities into Mexico?
More staff, I think. Okay. We would need Mexican staff to help with service post-sale. We already had a few clients in Mexico, but we were serving them in English and French. So to be able to serve in Spanish is the next tier for us, and we will eventually build the team there to support the clientele that we're getting.
Do you have any recommendations for the Trade Commissioner Service, things that could be improved based on your experience?
We did submit a few at the time. I didn't have very many. It was from the point of view of like matchmaking, meetings, everything. Even when they had meetings that didn't show up for whatever reason, they actually found someone else who was also free and then put them on the spot to meet with us immediately. So being a company selling into that market, having meetings all day long with decision makers was a really good experience. They had translators on the spot too, which was really good. So the meetings that they found on the spot needed a translator on the spot, and that was all facilitated in real time.
Outstanding. I'm very glad to hear it. Mr. Fulton, it strikes me, and this is my opinion, that our government right now is rushing to put an agreement, a trade agreement in place with Mercosur. Yet at the same time, we're not rushing to get an agreement put into place respecting CUSMA. Are you concerned about the pace at which these two things are happening. On one hand, I hear, well, let's not rush into a bad deal, yet we're rushing. Do you have an opinion, sir?
A brief answer, Mr. Fulton, please.
Very concerned about the hasty agreement that's being worked on Mercosur. It does not seem to align with really the trade relationship that we rely on as a country, but specifically as a beef sector. There's no replacing the U.S. Given that 75% of our exports are destined for that market, and so that's where the focus, I think, should be placed.
Madame Lapointe for 4 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Merci beaucoup à tous
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses for being here with us today. You're helping us a great deal in the research. A question for you, Mr. Fahy. You referred earlier on to Chapter 19 of the CUSMA renegotiation. Last time it was negotiated, it was 2017-2018. That was the latest version, the last version. Now, technology has evolved so quickly since then. What are your opinions about this? Earlier on, you referred to Europe and the European standards and then the American standards. Could you maybe tell us what you would like us to prioritize when the renegotiation actually happens at this level? I think we need to ensure that the approaches and the regulations we have, when they affect Canadian lives, that they have specific systems to protect Canadians. And if it's a flow from one to the other, we're not necessarily going to have that. Now, it's a Canadian company. Yesterday, I went to ChatGPT and I wrote in who are the best in my sector who sell this type of product, and my company didn't come up. So one of the reasons was because it was other Canadians. But why? What's the difference when I do a search on Canada that this company is not mentioned for that? That's just an example of something I did yesterday, just to give me an idea of what I could talk about today. But there is no protection system. CRTC does have protection. They have recommended suggestions on television, for example. Maybe with Google, you see this. When AI terminology, when they make decisions, you need a Canadian component that watches. How do you ensure that Canadian businesses are protected? And my recommendation, although I'm not an expert, it was just a search on AI, and you have to talk about this among yourselves, but there are policies put in place that protect companies in Canada, or Canadian companies, that require a minimum number of or level of quality when you buy AI products. In my area, if we use AI to help us hire, we need to know why the AI system has made this decision. There shouldn't be a black box. We have to see that the decision's been made because of such and such element. It has to be clear-cut and precise. That's the type of standard that they have in Europe. In the United States, they haven't really got this. They just want companies to do things and determine their own standards. But companies say that governments should have standards, but no one's doing anything about it. So we can implement some standards that are slightly better than what we have at the moment. They will protect Canadian companies. And if Canadian companies want to come and sell their AI, well, they would. It's like the RGGP. They would have to comply with Canadian standards. It's the same thing with milk, with dairy. To simplify, they're not allowed to come because the quality isn't as high. We need the same type of standards for AI. And what I'm saying is, if the government helps to buy the technology, we have to show that what's existing, because otherwise we don't have any companies to. Now, the Buy Canada system is very good, and this should be extended and help companies in Canada to have their products actually there on the market.
In for Mr. Deschênes.
Merci beaucoup. Si vous avez des choses à envoyer là-dessus.
Thank you. If you have anything to send us, please don't hesitate in writing. We can pop it into some other research. Thank you.
We have the votes. Mr. Deschênes, do you want to try and get in a question?
OK,
Go
on
ahead,
essaie.
please.
On essaie, Madame la Présidente. Merci. Une question pour vous, Monsieur
Carter. Question for Mr. Carter. For you, Mr. Carter. Sorry. Child labour. We know that that's alleged as a problem by the Americans in the coffee sector or coffee industry. What measures have you made on your side to ensure that the coffee that you're producing or selling has not come from child labour? Thank you.
Je suis désolée, je n'ai pas entendu l'interprétation.
Have any comments? Oh.
Yep, I apologize. The translation isn't coming through.
Alors, je vais réessayer pour
I'll
permettre
try again to allow the interpreters to interpret. Mr. Carter, the measures you take to ensure that the coffee you're buying is not from an area where they're using child labour.
The translator's not coming through the headset.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We have gone this far. We have a vote. I'm going to end the meeting. By the time we do the vote, we don't need to come back. Everybody's okay with that? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much to our witnesses for your information. I'm sure we'll see you back again before too long. Meeting adjourned.